Today we're continuing our discussion of the Tao Te Ching by the sage Lao Tzu, which has been considered by many one of the great scriptures that exist. And so we're looking at the wisdom and how it applies to our life. So let me ask you a question. Would you like to be an enlightened leader? How many of you would like to be an enlightened leader? Now, some may say, well, I'm not in a company or I'm not in the business world anymore. But are you a parent? Are you a grandparent? Do you interact with people? Are you visible to others in some way? Well, I would say then you are a leader, because how you are in your life influences other people. And Lao Tzu, in the 17th verse of the Tao Te Ching, gives us a really high vision for what it means to be an enlightened leader. So maybe we're not there yet, but we can at least aspire in the direction of that, right? Of an enlightened leader. So let's hear what he has to say about being an enlightened leader. With the greatest leader above them, people barely know one exists. Next comes one whom they love and praise. Next comes one whom they fear. Next comes one whom they despise and defy. When a leader trusts no one trusts him. The great leader speaks little. He never speaks carelessly. He works without self-interest and leaves no trace. When all is finished, the people say, "We did it ourselves." Wow, huh? Interesting, right? The greatest leader, with the greatest leader, people barely know one exists. So the great leader, the enlightened leader, is not out there trying to build her or himself up. He or she is present, is involved, but isn't making it all about him or her. That's how I understand that, right? They're helping to empower the other people involved. So he's talking about 4 different levels of leadership, it looks like to me. The enlightened leader, where you barely know that person's there, but they're still involved. This doesn't mean hands off, doesn't mean they're not doing anything. Oh, they are, but they're not trying to draw the attention. Then is the leader who people love and praise. So this person, I imagine, is more involved and utilizes the giving love and praise to others, which, when you give love and praise to others, it's a whole lot more effective than using fear to control people, right? That's what he said. The next level of leadership is the person who uses fear to get people to do what they want. And as studies have shown in the classroom, a teacher who uses fear to get her students to behave, when that teacher leaves the classroom, those students misbehave, right? How many of y'all been a misbehaving student sometime? Come on, let's be honest. Especially when there's a substitute teacher. And however, teachers who are encouraging, who see their role as encouraging and praising people and loving their students, when that teacher's not in the classroom, those students continue to be well behaved. And so a leader who is loving, encouraging, believing in people is going to have a more positive response than someone who is using fear to get people to do what they want to do. And then he talks about the last kind of leader who people actually despise and try to defy. So they may get results, but they're going to get pushback. Dictators, eventually, there are uprisings, right, against those people, because they're not really there to support the well-being of the people they're leading. They're just taking it all for themselves, I imagine. And so people despise them. And it's interesting, these different levels of leadership that he's talking about. And when I think about American politics, Republicans and Democrats and everything in between, where are we in that level of leadership? You know, are we coming from a place of where there's love and praise, or are we defying one another? Are we going against each other? You know, where are we? It's a rhetorical question. I'm not asking for an answer. But it makes one wonder, right? We're given by Lao Tzu a high example of someone who's not looking for a lot of attention and praise, isn't manipulative, but is encouraging and supportive and empowering people. And then we have people who are leading by love and praise and encouraging people. Where are we as leaders in our country? And where do we want to be? Where do we want to go? He says that, and we know children who despise a parent, right? And they try to defy the parent. And their parents might be real disciplinarians at home. And then those students go off to college and they are wild as can be. Any of you know any of the people like that? You know, they've got to be in this and this and that and that. And those kids are wild as can be when they're not around their parents. And then you know other kids whose parents believe in them, whose parents treat them with respect, whose parents, build and empower them. And those kids are well behaved when they're not around their parents. So what level of leader do we want to be? He says, when a leader trusts no one trusts him. Interesting, right? Stephen Covey, the author of the 7 Habits book, his son years ago wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. And it was about how trust was important to effective business in the business world. And he said to approach everyone with the foundation of trusting, unless, of course, that person proves untrustworthy. But rather than approaching relationships from a place of suspicion or cynicism, approach them from a place of trust until they prove untrustworthy. Right? If and until. And he wrote a whole book called Smart Trust. So that's a good foundation to begin with people, isn't it? To go from a place that people are trustworthy, and I trust this person, and then you go from there. But I just want to throw in, I think it's important to listen to our gut. Right? You go with a place of trust, but if your gut says, wait a minute, the alarm bell's going to start going off, then you got to listen to that. And listen to that. And when you learn from a person, 'cause I've got to say this to spiritual people who want to see the best in people and believe the best in people, but I also have to throw out the other side of it, right? And that is, he tells a story of a man who was in business with a friend. And, well, the friend tried to take over the company, and it was really some bad stuff. And a couple of years later, no, they went separate ways. A couple of years later, that friend came back, the one who had basically betrayed his friend, he came back and said, hey, let's go into business again. I got a business idea. And the friend said to him something like, look, I like you. You know, I'm happy to go to lunch with you, but I'm not going back into business with you. You know, he knew where to draw that line. So Dr. Dyer, in his book, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life, talks about the importance of empowering people and trusting them to make decisions that are good decisions. Expressing your viewpoint, expressing your opinion, how you see it, but trusting that they can make decisions that are going to be the right ones for what they're doing and what they're involved in. Empowering them. So he says, spend some time observing, being aware, observing, and giving nonverbal feedback, but trusting that people are going to make good decisions that are right for them and right for the situation. So, not coming from a place of needing to interfere, needing to interject, needing to put yourself, into it, but trusting and empowering them to make those decisions. And so that's kind of like what Lao Tzu's talking about. The great leader who is not leaving any trace. The great leader who is not doing this out of self-interest. Oh, that's, what an ideal, isn't it? To be a leader not for self-interest reasons. You're not taking the position just because of the status, just because you're going to feel special and important, just because you're getting a raise with that position, just because of external reasons, because it's going to boost the person's brand, but rather because this is what I'm called to do. This is what life is giving me. This is what life is asking me. It's asking me to be a leader in this situation. So there's no self-interest in that. I mean, other than feeling good about what you're doing and wanting to fulfill your purpose on the planet. That's very different than I'm going to be a leader, I'm special, I'm important, I'm going to be in people's view and they're going to see me and blah, 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 blah. That's leaving traces. He says the great leader leaves little trace. I think of water. If you jump into water and leave a big splash, there's a lot of traces. But the enlightened leader leaves a little ripple, so that the people feel, look what I did it. I did it. They were empowered. They were empowered to do it. He works without self-interest and leaves no trace. Donald Walters, a.k.a. Swami Kriyananda, who was a direct student of Paramahansa Yogananda, he built a spiritual community in Northern California, which I lived in for a couple of years. There was like 200 or 300 people living there, families, single people, children, all different kinds of people living there. And there were businesses, and it had really built up. Started in the 60s. They started with teepees, believe it or not, tents in Northern California in the 60s. That's how it all started. And then it evolved to become one of the great yoga and meditation centers in the world. Well, he says that one night he was out at night walking among the houses. And, it's in the mountains, it's in the foothills of Northern California. And he said he could see the lights from all the different houses that were now there in that community. And he thought to himself, look what I built. And then he thought to himself, no. That's not the right attitude. Look what was done. Look what was done. He took himself out of the equation. Not look what I built, look what I did, but look what was done. Wow. That's humility. We're not used to that, are we? As kids, we get gold stars for our A's and B's or whatever. You know, we get trophies. We get our name up on the wall. We get all this stuff encouraged. And I think that's good. That helps people. You need to have a strong ego before you can surrender your ego, right? You need to have that sense of self before you can turn it over to that higher power. So all that's not bad. That's good. Praise is good. That's good. But the enlightened leader is coming from a whole nother place where it's about serving God, serving Spirit, making a difference, not trying to build up the sense of self. See, trying, as the master teacher Jesus said, lose yourself to find yourself. I remember asking a minister that question in front of a congregation. I said, well, what self are you losing and what self are you gaining? And they chuckled because it's really, well, you're losing that sense of separation, you know, that ego self that gets anxious and fearful and craves stuff and all that, needs stuff, and you start finding more of that true self that we are, that's whole and complete. So he gives us a big vision there. Jesus himself said, I of myself can do nothing. I of myself can do nothing. It's the Father within me that does the work. The sages tell us that we're not really doing anything. It's doing us. We think we're doing it, but it's doing us. So, but, you know, it takes wisdom to live that way. You say, well, it's doing us. I'll just lay here on the couch and do nothing. See what it does. No, there's a balance there. I work and the Father works, you know, as he said. So when all is finished, the people say, we did it ourselves. That leader has so empowered people, not hands off, empowered, to such a degree that they feel good about what they've done. And Dr. Dyer gives a little tip. He says, take pride in refusing to take credit for the achievement of others. In other words, if people under your leadership do something well, don't take credit for what they've done. Take pleasure in their joy and in their happiness. And that will prove more rewarding than taking credit. Look what they did under my leadership. No, take joy in their joy and happiness and what they've accomplished. I think that's a great thing to do. And this Thanksgiving, when we're with family and friends, if that's what we're going to be doing, how many of y'all are going to be with family or friends this Thanksgiving? This could be a good thing for us to do, and that's to be an enlightened leader with our friends and family. He says here, the enlightened leader listens, right? He or she listens. The great leader speaks little. The late yoga sage Swami Satchidananda used to say, your tongue is barricaded by teeth and lips, so that you gotta, think twice before you speak. You got all these barricades here before anything comes out. In other words, too, as the book of Proverbs says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. So he used to say that when you talk a lot, you reveal your ignorance. But the wise person speaks from wisdom. So that's a good reminder, isn't it? So when we're with our friends and family, we have that unique, wonderful opportunity to get our buttons pushed, to respond from conditioning of how we've been in the past with those people, right? Because who knows best how to push our buttons than the people we're closest to, right? And as Eckhart Tolle talks about, the the shadow self, that the shadow self likes to feed off other people's shadow self. So what better than to be with relatives who get to press our buttons and touch our shadow self, right? So that it can feed off each other. Sounds like a horror movie, doesn't it? So, yeah, Clarice, sounds beautiful. So we can be enlightened leaders for our friends and family by keeping in mind Lao Tzu's high vision, to not make it about us, to empower people, to listen, to choose words that come from our higher nature, our higher self. When our buttons get pushed, to be present to those buttons, present to that stuff without reacting, and be some light and encouragement and joy in this time. After all, we're on a spiritual journey, right? Isn't that what we ought to be helping to be a support, rather than making it all about us, you know? And then people are going, well, look what that spiritual journey is doing for them. It's all about them, you know, look at that. They're whining and complaining and drawing all the attention to themselves. No, Lao Tzu is saying the enlightened leader empowers others and leaves a little trace. Little trace. So that gives us something to strive for, doesn't it? Wayne Dyer has a quote from Hafiz, 14th century poet, who said, "Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.'" Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. So Dyer says, love those you're entrusted to lead, just as the sun loves our planet. Simply be there to serve, never demanding anything in return. So then, in just a few minutes, we're going to cover verse 18. How's that sound? It's going to take me a minute to read that verse. It's a long one. But I'm going to summarize it really quickly. When the greatness of the Tao is present, action arises from one's own heart. When the greatness of the Tao is absent, action comes from the rules of kindness and justice. If you need rules to be kind and just, if you act virtuous, this is a sure sign that virtue is absent. Thus we see the great hypocrisy. When kinship falls in discord, piety and rites of devotion arise. When the country falls into chaos, official loyalists will appear. Patriotism is born. Bottom line, when we're in tune with spirit, when we're in tune with the Tao, kindness and love and generosity come naturally, right? They come spontaneously. They come from your authenticity. They come from our heart. But when we're not in tune with that spirit, Lao Tzu's telling us, then you need rules telling you to be kind and loving. You do it because there's rules. And Dr. Dyer here is telling us, be in tune with that spirit of the Tao. And then you can respond from your inner self. Not be driven by the rules, but to be authentically your true self. And that's a good reminder. Jesus acknowledged it. He said to people, when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who stand on the corner and give alms and pray in order to impress other people. They have their reward. What is their reward? Their reward is they're impressing other people. But they're not in tune with the spirit within them. So we want to be in tune so that we can be real. We can come from that true nature of who we are. Dyer also encourages us to not just have patriotism for our own country, but to have patriotism for all people in every country. I saw him in person a number of times, but one time in New York, it was right after 9/11. I admired him. He stood up on the stage and we were in this patriotic spirit, America, America. And he got up and said that very thing. He said, I don't know about America, America. We gotta love people in all countries. All countries. Everybody's a person. Everywhere. I thought, wow, yeah, that's right. Have patriotism for all people everywhere. One of the things he encouraged us here, and I made a note about, I was watching something in China where the leader was speaking in this gathering of people, and they were all in their red uniforms and stuff, and every time they'd clap, and I thought to myself, yeah, you better clap. You better clap. You're going to be in that room and you're not clapping, looking enthusiastic. I thought, yeah, you gotta pretend in that room, or you might find yourself somewhere else, not in that comfortable room, that's for sure. So, not putting it on, that's the difference as I see it. Here's the difference, because I think it's important too that, let's say you got something you know is the right thing to do, right? But you don't really feel like doing it. Ever have something you know is right to do, but you don't feel like doing it? Yeah, every day. So let's pretend it's something kind or something compassionate or something caring that you know it's the right thing to do, but you don't feel like doing it. What do? Do you just say, well, I don't feel like doing it, so I'm not going to be inauthentic. I'm just going to stay home and turn on the television. I don't think that's what it means. I think that when your intention is, I want to do the right thing, I want to be caring, I want to be compassionate, so I'm going to do it whether I feel like it or not. That's not hypocritical, because your intention is to do the right thing. Your intention is to be compassionate and caring. And if you do that enough, then it will start to come more automatically, where you don't think about it. You just do it. So that's where I see it a little differently than how it could be read here. And that is, if your intention is sincere, that's the difference. And the same is true with being friendly, with being warm with others. You may not feel like it, but your intention is to help people to feel good. Your intention is to help affirm people. So even though you may not feel particularly friendly at a party or whatever, or whenever, you act as if. You put on a smile. You act friendly, because that's your intention, is to make a difference. And that's how I see Lao Tzu is basically, what's hypocritical is when we're pretending to like someone, or we're acting nice, and then we're going, what an idiot he is. Hey, boss, how are you? Yeah, you look wonderful, everything's great, and all that. What an idiot. That, to me, that's hypocritical. Or the person who's acting real friendly and blah, 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 and they're just trying to get something. That's hypocritical. But intention, one, to be in tune with that Spirit of God within us so that love and joy and kindness comes out more frequently and spontaneously, and just having the intention, acting as if, is a way to cultivate. Shakespeare said, assume a virtue if you have it not. What is the virtue you want? Assume it. Act as if. Do it enough. And it starts to become more and more part of our personality. So, since this chapter is called Living Without Rules, which I didn't go into that much, Dyer says, look at the rules you follow. Ask yourself, what are the reasons why you follow that rule? What are the heart reasons for following that rule? Why do you stop at a traffic light? Well, one, you don't want to get killed by going through a traffic light and getting hit by a car. And two, you don't want to hurt anyone else, right? Look at the underlying reason for following rules. And look at your life and see, what rules do I break? When do I break a rule? And why do I break the rule? And then what are the heart reasons for keeping the rule? I don't know about you, but when I think about that, I think about that's going on in our world a lot right now, isn't it? Do I get vaccinated? Do I not get vaccinated? Do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? And I think it's useful to look back and go, well, why would I get vaccinated? What is the reason? Because I think people are responding a lot from their emotion, and they're reactive, but they're not necessarily standing back objectively and going, okay, what is the reason for this? Why would I do that? What is the heart reason for doing that or not doing that? To look underneath the rule so that we live from our guidance, live from spirit, and take action from that, not from gut reactive emotion, but rather from the calm place, the calm center inside of us, And even though I've gotten vaccinated and I've done all that, I've worn the mask and so on and believe in that, I've talked to someone who did not want to be vaccinated and was asking my opinion. Well, not exactly my opinion, because that person's guidance was she didn't want to be vaccinated. She had her own reasons. She felt like her inner guidance was telling her not to get vaccinated. So what could I do except I'm all for people following their inner guidance. All I could say is, if that's your inner guidance, then I support you in following your inner guidance. I wasn't saying I support what you're doing. I support you following your inner guidance. And I think that's ultimately, how can anybody do better than trying to follow their inner guidance? And so Wayne Dyer is saying, and by the way, I'm not saying don't get vaccinated, because I believe in that. That's my inner guidance. But, I'm saying look underneath the rule and look at what is the reason for the rule, rather than just not thinking about it, not tuning in from a calm place. And he's saying, look at all the rules. Live beyond the rules. Live from your inner guidance. Live from your inner self, ultimately. And again, Hafiz says, everyone is God speaking. Everyone is God speaking. Not just the Democrats, or not just the Republicans, not just the vaccinated, not just the unvaccinated. Everyone is God speaking. Why not be polite and listen to him? Boy, would that transform life on earth, wouldn't? Respect for every person, at least enough to listen and to seek first to understand. Wow, then we could all work together and accomplish and move in a direction together. Let's get still for a moment. And we acknowledge that right now we are in tune with the Tao expressing in and through and as us. And Father, Mother God, we thank you for your guidance through this great sage, Lao Tzu, and his writings that have impacted people's lives over 2,500 years. We're grateful that we can come together today to understand more the deep wisdom of this God-realized being, and see how we can aspire to greater heights within our own being. And through this activity, through this aspiration, contribute to harmony and love and healing of our planet. And we're grateful for your love, Spirit, because for some of us, this is a really lofty way to live. But we know that one step at a time, that you have our hand, so to speak, and our back, that you're guiding and directing us, and that you're loving us all the time, 24/7. And we are so grateful for this. And so it is. Amen. Please join me in the prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Forever we are, God is, and all is well. Thanks for being here this morning.